What if the secret plans for the next great power war were suddenly out in the open? Well, today, we're opening the file on a scenario that sounds like it's straight out of a thriller, but it's all based on some very real analysis and, yes, some alleged leaks. We're talking about China's potential 2026 invasion of Taiwan.
And that's the big question, isn't it? This comes directly from some of the analysis looking at the rising tensions in the Taiwan Strait. It's a heavy question for sure, but it gets right to the heart of what's really at stake here.
So, for this explainer, that's exactly where we're starting. Let's put on our investigator hats for a bit. We're going to piece together clues from all over the place, from supposed hacktivist leaks to official military war game scenarios, all to get a clearer picture of this potential flashpoint.
Okay, so every investigation needs a spark, a starting point, and ours begins with reports of a covert plan, one that was supposedly brought to light not by spies in trench coats, but by hacktivists.
Now, this alleged leak, if it's true, points to a really specific and, frankly, alarming partnership. It suggests that Russia isn't just a strategic ally to China, but an active trainer, sharing tactical know-how with China's People's Liberation Army for a very particular mission. And here's why this is such a potential game changer. We're not just talking about a classic D-Day style naval invasion anymore. This breaks down a lightning-fast airborne assault. You drop in special forces, they seize an airfield, and then you use that captured airfield as your own landing zone to fly in the heavy stuff like tanks. It's a strategy designed to completely bypass Taiwan's tough coastal defenses. Having a plan is one thing, right? But the real question is, when could it actually happen? And this is where our investigation uncovers the next piece of the puzzle, a surprisingly specific timeline. This timeline is absolutely critical. You've got top U.S. military analysts talking about something called the Davidson window. It's named after a former admiral who warned that 2026 is when a high-risk period really begins, a time when China's military might be at its strongest relative to the U.S. And what's really spooky is how that lines up almost perfectly with Xi Jinping's own public deadline of 2027 for his military to be ready to take Taiwan. Suddenly, these aren't just random years anymore. They're dates on a calendar. And look, this isn't just speculation. The U.S. Naval Institute actually ran a super detailed war game for this exact scenario. In their simulation, China not only invades, but manages to grab key spots like the port of Kaohsiung before the invasion stalls out. But the simulation came with a huge warning. If the West gets tunnel vision and focuses only on Taiwan, it could walk right into a much bigger strategic trap. So, if a conflict did kick off, what would it actually look like on the ground? Well, the answer comes down to the raw military power on each side. And some of that info comes from another supposed leak, this one reportedly from inside the Pentagon itself. Yeah, this slide, it paints a pretty stark picture. On one hand, China has a massive advantage in pure numbers. We're talking hypersonic missiles, drones, you name it. And their factories can churn them out at a terrifying speed. Satellite photos confirm they're practicing constantly. The U.S., on the other hand, is built for precision strikes, but it has this one giant vulnerability that isn't even on the battlefield. Over 10,000. Just let that sink in. According to one analysis, that's how many Chinese companies it takes to build a single U.S. warship. This isn't just a statistic, it's a critical weakness. The very supply chain for America's defense is deeply tangled up with its main strategic competitor. So let's just recap the challenge here for the U.S. You've got critical supply chains that are dependent on China. You have a military that's really not built for a long, drawn-out war. And then you have this long-standing policy of strategic ambiguity, which is basically a fancy way of saying, we won't tell you if we'll defend Taiwan or not. It was designed to keep everyone guessing, but now it might just be inviting a huge miscalculation. Okay, so faced with this massive challenge, what's the American response? Well, this leads us into a theorized counter-strategy, a sort of secret plan to proactively push back on China's influence around the world. The core idea behind this clip China's wings doctrine is pretty simple. Don't wait for the fight to come to you. Instead, you take the initiative by messing with China's network of allies and resource partners around the globe. You try to weaken them before a major conflict can even start. And we are not just talking about the Pacific here. The proposed targets are literally all over the map. Places like Venezuela and Iran, which are key energy partners for China, and even Greenland, a hugely strategic spot in the Arctic. The chessboard is the entire planet. So you end up with this fundamental clash of philosophies. The U.S. approach is described as using bombs, quick, disruptive military actions.
China and Russia, meanwhile, are playing the long game with builds, using economic deals and strategic patience to grow their influence. And that leads to the central debate. Does the American approach actually prevent a war, or does it just light the fuse faster?
So whether it starts with an invasion or a counter-intervention, the potential fallout from all this is global. Which begs the question, what do the experts think the real odds are of this all coming to a head? Well, the Council on Foreign Relations, in its big forecast for 2026, lists a China-Taiwan crisis as a Tier 1 risk. Their assessment of the odds? A 50-50 shot. A coin flip? That is an unbelievably sobering number coming from a major think tank. And they don't pull any punches about what that means. They state directly that this isn't just some regional flare-up. It has, and I'm quoting them here, high-impact, great-power war potential. This is the ultimate stake we've been talking about this whole time. So we've gone through the alleged invasion plans, the war game simulations, the stark military imbalance, and the proposed counters. Every piece of this puzzle seems to suggest a world inching closer and closer to a flashpoint. Which brings us all the way back to that one final question. With all the pieces now on the board, is 2026 going to be the year it all kicks off?